In this video, we will explore the chilling case of the Golden State Killer, a serial killer and a rapist who terrorized California for a decade. This case is a complex and fascinating example of betrayal, deception, and the power of DNA evidence. Between 1976 and 1986, the Golden State Killer committed over 50 crimes and 12 murders in California. The victims were primarily women, and the crime were characterized by the distinct module or DNA. It involves breaking into the homes, tying up the victim, and committing heinous acts of violence. The investigation into Golden State Killer was one of the largest and most complex in the California history. The police collected the evidence from the crime scene, including DNA samples, fingerprints, and the witnesses. However, despite the efforts of the police, the killer remained at large for over 30 years. In 2018, a breakthrough in the case came when a DNA evidence was used to identify the Golden State Killer as a Joseph James Diagonello, a 72-year-old former police officer. The DNA evidence was collected from one of the crime scene and was matched to a James DNA, which was obtained from this card item. James was arrested in April 2018 and charged with multiple counts of murders, rape, and burglary. During the trial, the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of James' guilt, including DNA evidence, witnesses' testimony, and the testimony from the victims. In August 2020, um, James pleaded guilty to the 13 counts of murders and was sentenced to life in prison without a possibility of parole. The Golden State Killer is a classic example of crime motivated by desire of power and control. James' action was criticized by a lack of empathy and a willingness to inflict harm on innocent people. This case was also highlighted the importance of DNA evidence in solving crime and the power of technology in bringing perpetrators to the justice. The victim of the Golden State Killer suffered severe physical and emotional trauma as a result of the crime. Many were subjected to the brutal physical attack, including rape and assault, which left them with lasting physical and emotional scars. The psychological impact on the crime and the victim was profound. Many experienced anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder, aka PTSD, as a result of them as a result of the trauma they endured. Some victims struggled to cope with the emotional aftermath of the crime, leading to long-term physical damage. The impact of the crime of the families of the victim was also significant. Family members experienced feeling of guilt, shame, anger, as well as deep sense of loss and grief. Some families struggle to come to terms with the trauma their loved ones had endured, leading to strained relationships and emotional distress. The long-term effect of the crime on the victims and their family were far-reaching. Many victims and their families experience ongoing emotional and psychological distress, including anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Some victims also experience physical health problems as a result of the trauma they endured. In the aftermath of the crime, many victims and their family sought the support and healing through counseling, therapy, and support groups. Some also found solace in advocacy work, seeking the help who had experienced a similar trauma. The trial process began with a pre-trial proceeding, during which one the prosecution and defense team prepared for the trial. This includes gathering evidence, interviewing witnesses, developing trial strategies. The next step in the trial process was jury selection. The prosecution was and defense team selected a jury of 12 people to hear the case. The trial began with an opening statement from the prosecution and defense team. The prosecution presented its case, outlining the evidence and the witnesses that would be presented. The defense team also presented its case, outlining its strategy and defense. This prosecution presented its evidence, including DNA evidence, witnesses' testimony, and testimony from the victims. The defense teams also presented evidence, including expert testimony and alternative theories. The prosecution and defense teams called the witnesses to testify during the trial. These witnesses include victims, experts, and law enforcement officials. The prosecution and defense teams cross-examined each other's witnesses, challenging their testimony and credibility. The prosecution and defense teams also presented a closing argument, summarizing their cases, making a final agreement to the jury. Jury Jury deliberate considering the evidence and testimony presented during the trial, and the jury reached a verdict and finding the defendant guilty of multiple counts of rape, murder, and burglary. The defendant was sentenced to life in prison without a possibility of parole. The role of the DNA in the Golden State Killer case. DNA evidence played a crucial role in the Golden State Killer case. DNA samples were collected from the crime scene and characterized using STR analysis. The DNA samples were profiled and DNA profile was created. This profile was compared to the DNA sample from the suspect and other evidence. The match was made between the DNA profile and the crime scene and the DNA sample from the James, a former police officer. The DNA was a key part of prosecution's case, providing strong evidence of James' guilt. The DNA evidence had a significant impact on the cases, helping identify the perpetrator, bring him to the justice. The evidence were collected from the crime scene, victim's clothing and personal item, suspect clothing and the personal item. The psychology and motivation behind the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer psychological profile suggests that he was highly intelligent, calculating individual with a strong desire for control and power. A motivation behind the Golden State Killer crime belief that two combination factors of including a desire for power and control, a need for excitement and thrill-seeking, a sense of anxiety and narcissism. A Golden State Killer's personality traits are believed that include antisocial behavior, lack of empathy, and manipulative behavior and curiosity. Several psychological theories have been proposed to explain the Golden State Killer behaviors, including attachment theory, social learning theory, and psychopathy. The Golden State Killer's childhood and upbringing may have played a role in shaping his personality and behavior. The Golden State Killer may have experienced trauma and stress in his life, which could have contributed to his behavior. In conclusion, the psychology and the motivation behind the Golden State Killer's crime are complex and multifaceted. Understanding the psychology and profile, motivation, and the personality traits of the perpetrator can provide the value insight into the cases. The Golden State Killer thought on his crime, remorse and regret. The Golden State Killer, Joseph James, has expressed remorse and regret for his crime. He has acknowledged the harm and suffering he caused to his victims and their family. Despite his expression of remorse, James' actions suggest a lack of empathy for his victims. He was able to commit a heinous crime without fully considering the impact. James has attempted to justify or excuse his behavior, citing factors such as childhood trauma and mental health issues. James has also attempted to minimize the severity of his crime, downplaying the impact of his victim and their families. In conclusion, the State's killer's thoughts on his crimes are complex and multifaceted. While he expressed remorse and regret his actions and suggests a lack of his sympathy, understanding his thought and motivation can provide a valuable insight into the development on his behavior and the event led to his crime. Additionally, a psychological evaluation of Diagoli much reveal underlying issues that contribute to his behavior. This could include personality disorder, mental health issues, or other factors. The impact of James' crimes on his victims and their families cannot be overstated. Many have suffered the psychological, many have said emotional trauma, and some have even lost their life. Rehabilitations and the treatment progress might have been beneficial for an individual like James, who have committed serious crimes. The program could help addressing underlying the issues and reduce the risk of future offense. The family reaction of Joseph James to his crime was shocked and devastated by his crime. They had no idea that their loved one was capable of such heinous act. At first, James' family members may have experienced denial and disbelief. They may have suggested to come to terms with the fact that their loved one was responsible for the terrible crimes. As a reality, Joseph crimes Joseph crimes said in his family's member will likely experience a significant emotional distress. They may have felt a range of emotion including grief, anger, and shame. James' family faced intense public security and media attention. They they have felt overwhelmed and embarrassed by the attention. Additionally, the family dynamic of Golden State Killer may have played a role of his behaviors. Some possible factors including dysfunctional family environment, a history of abuse or neglect, a lack of empathy, and emotional support. The impact of the Golden State Killer's crime on his family member have significant role. Some possible effects include emotional trauma, social isolation, and financial difficulties.